Jeff, Lois, Lynn, Jacqueline, how are you? George Einan, thank you for coming. And Frank, I can see Frank's picture. Can everyone hear me okay?
Little low.
Excellent. We're going to get going here. We've just gone through about 15 speakers this morning at the kickoff of this conference. Then they went into an incubator where absolutely every single participant could share their experiences on mental health wellness for 3 minutes. So rather than just having the talking heads, everyone participated for 3 minutes. So all of those sessions were supposed to wrap up at 12:15. Our session, I didn't facilitate it, but it did go a couple minutes late. So there'll be some people coming in. I'm sure others have run late a little bit there too. So got a few more people in the waiting room that are looking to come in. And how's everyone doing? Everyone's on mute. I'm going to allow participants to unmute themselves. There's Wayne Steer. I can see Morris. I feel like the romper room lady for us old people that might still remember that. So feel free to unmute yourself just for now, and we'll turn the mute on in a minute. I'm going to put my headset on so I can hear better. So, everyone can still hear me fine?
Yes.
Yes.
So, for the newbies on Zoom, and I've been facilitating Zoom calls, probably 50 or 100 calls since the lockdown with friends and family and different groups, and I'm still learning about this toy called Zoom. Welcome to the Creating Collaboratives workshop. Morris on the call helped me come up with a war cry for 2021, calling that warrior cry is creating collaboratives. And this is work that has really been coming on for about 10 years in my work of helping organizations and multi-stakeholder groups improve. So you've seen the workshop description and the registration. So we'll go through the agenda in just a second, but on the Zoom logistics, if you look and just drag your cursor around the upper right of your screen, you'll get a little view box, and you can play around with this and get the view that you want so you can see what you want. There's a speaker view, which will box out and highlight who's ever speaking. There's a gallery view where you can see someone. And when I screen share, you'll have some options around seeing a speaker, the gallery, and whatever's on the screen. So I'll do a screen share. Actually, I'll do a screen share right now, and you guys can play around with that. I've had some good feedback from people to say, I didn't know I could do all that. That's great, thank you. So we'll open up in my calendar the agenda for today. And if anyone's having an issue, feel free to speak up. You've all seen the meeting request. The attachments we'll be looking at during the course of the presentation will be there. And what we can also do, so you can see you have your upper right box for view, but any box of anyone else on the screen, you can mute them, and then they have a little blue box in the upper right of their screen. And there's choices you can do. You can reach in and chat with them. You can rename them. If you don't like someone's name, you can give them a name. And so you can play around with that too. So again, you can't break anything unless you hit the leave meeting button. And if it says, are you sure? And you go out, come on back in, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to open this up a little bit more. So just get comfortable with it. If any, maybe I'll get Wayne Steer, if he doesn't mind, if he can monitor the chat a little bit and just to make sure that people can, if there's anything that, any comments that people make. Let's get into the, so we've talked a bit about the logistics.
Greg, it says chat disabled for some reason.
Okay, that's good to know. And that's,
So my job would be pretty simple.
yeah, and it should, I'm not sure how not to disable that. So let's skip the chat if this was more of a me. I think there's been some restrictions put on because we were required to set this up on a registration basis. And when you go down that rabbit hole on Zoom, it resets a bunch of settings for you. So typically when you have a workshop or a large member group, they don't allow the chat to work. So that's probably what's happened there. Anyone that wants to say anything, feel free to raise their hand. And if you just want to use a physical hand, or you can use the raise hand, which is in your toolbar under reactions. So we'll also talk a little bit about our conversation ground rules. These are 5 things that people need to work better together. It's based on SCARF, which is a brain science piece of research that you can Google, and there's 50 feet of research. People need some certainty. So we have an agenda here. We're going to try and stick to it. And that's important for anytime you have a meeting, people want to know what starts, what's finished, when the breaks are, and when we're going to be finished. So that's a nice little hook for people to talk about. You can put your email away, drop your device, because we're going to have a break at 10:15 today, or for something like that. We really insist on openness. This is an open environment. We expect lots of participation. V is for voice. We want you to feel that you're being heard. And if you're not being heard, you let me know. I'm your facilitator, and it's my job to make sure everyone is heard. So let's just make sure we're on the same page there. Equality, that gets to pecking order. Anytime you have groups together and they get into pecking order, oh, the boss is here, so I better not say anything. We can do better. Pecking order can always be an issue for folks. So let's just make sure that, we're on a journey together as equals. There's no age, level, anything to that. And the last thing we really insist on is respect. And respect is, we all know what that means. One way we can really respect one another is by having one conversation at a time. And that includes being fully present here. I'm actually happy that we don't know how the chat to work, because sometimes people will fall into a second conversation. And I believe most of you would agree that multitasking is a myth, and you can't be fully present in one conversation and having another one either on your device with someone else in the room with you or in the chat. So chat's great for sharing, and so just think of those 5 things, the cover framework. Something else I want to share with you from just a general knowledge perspective, something called the uncanny valley. We have this big cerebral cortex in our brains, and it does all of our words, language, numbers, but it doesn't do our behavior. Our old limbic brain, our lizard brain, our reptilian brain, our original brain is our behavior and decision-making control center. It doesn't do language, words, or numbers. It's an input-output processing center. And you should know, and if you're feeling funny in Zoom days, about 30% of your brain's processing capacity can disappear when you're trying to process a digital image of another human being. And that limbic brain says, Greg, I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong, and it slows down the processing. So I'm going to coin a new term called Zoom fog. It's like you can do a 2-hour telephone conference call and walk away and feel great. As soon as you jump on this digital video technology, the Zoom fog can creep in. So I would argue to people, and I'm open to people's ideas, that a Zoom call for more than 60 minutes, you're playing with fire. So more frequent episodes of communication and conversation. So the call will be recorded and is being recorded as we speak. So if you're uncomfortable with your face showing up or your name showing up, change your name. And if you're really uncomfortable, feel free to leave the call and take in the recording, which will be on Bell's website. I'm going to be walking us through an agenda. I'm going to close this and stop the share. So the agenda for the day is I'd like you to think about your best experiences in collaboration. And we can just do some sharing on that. And it's not so much the experience, but what was good about the experience. What kinds of things were happening to make the experience exceptional. I want to talk about some barriers that you think that exist. I fundamentally believe that human beings are wired to collaborate, and we did it for about 200,000 years. And it's only the last 200 years in our human journey with industrialization, division of labor, that we've lost our way. The rise of the individual. We're free, we're individuals, we do whatever we like. And I think we haven't forgotten or lost our capacity. It's just the way we built our society. There's a bunch of barriers. So I'd love to know what people think about that. And then overcoming the barriers. So we'll have some conversations there. Then we'll break into some of the content. And I've got a few PDFs that I'll just speak to. And they're available on the meeting requests, so you have them already. I'm believing that in the Zoom environment that having a PDF instead of a PowerPoint is better. I'm a 1 or 2 page guy. Just speak to it and I'll open the field for questions. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end to cover off some just open conversation. And so far as I'm concerned, this room will be open until the last person leaves. So if you've bumped into someone, met somebody that's new, does that sound like a good use of your time until 1:15? Okay, if Wayne or Luke would like to keep an eye on the time, feel free to, this agenda is breaking down into 10-minute intervals. So I welcome anyone's facilitation of me as your facilitator. So let's stop the share for now. We'll bring it back. I don't think we have a large enough group that we need to mute everybody. So let's just have some fun and let's break in. And I'm going to take a couple notes. People's best experiences in collaboration. And before we get answers, I would say that anytime you have a group of people, this is my company's secret sauce after 15 years. Our business is all about asking questions, not giving answers. Questions are the pathway to conversation. Conversation is the pathway to building relationships. Relationships involve trust. Those are the glue that really bring a team or organization together when it comes to taking action. Anytime you ask a question, ask people just to hold off on blurting out a response. If I ask Jeff jumps in and says, whatever the answer is, we shut down our thoughts around what our answer might be to the question. And we all think about what Jeff just said. And it narrows from 100 ideas down to 1. And actually we get so attracted to Jeff's wonderful idea that we don't have any more. So when I started this business with my partner, who was a professional facilitator for 20 years, I was afraid to go into a session, have one question for a 1-hour breakout and not have enough answers to fill up the hour. So what we've done, and what you should do anytime you're talking to people, ask a question, get the group to think independently for 15, 30 seconds. In some cases, we'll have people work independently on characteristics in a scenario for 10 minutes. Before anyone says anything, you get a raft of ideas, and what happens is people really learn from each other. So let's just think about 30 seconds, that first question, and then we'll turn it over. I'm done talking now. And we'll turn it over. Think about your best experience in collaboration, working with others in any setting, in the workplace, in a multi-stakeholder setting, with your family members, trying to figure out how to barbecue the best steak or make the best shepherd's pie. What was it about that experience that comes to mind that made it exceptional for you? Have a few more people just joining us. And you should be able to unmute yourself. Let's have a conversation now. Lois, you've been around collaborating with the world for quite some time. You must have some guidance for this group of smart people. I know Wayne has. I know Jeff's been a collaborator, in fact, with Frank. Wayne Clancy is a master of collaboration and making great things happen. So I've just pitched
that.
I've just pitched the jump ball to say, think about your best experiences in collaboration, and what not so much, don't tell us the whole story, but what about that experience made it exceptional for you. So please jump in and talk. Wayne, what was your best experience?
I figured you'd probably ask me, which Wayne? Wayne Clancy or Wayne Steer?
Jump ball. Jump ball. It's your conversation.
Yes, Wayne Steer.
Wayne Clancy could take the rest of the call, so we better go to Wayne Steer.
There've been a number, but one that I can think of that has probably the greatest worldwide impact was a group that I was working with maybe 5 years ago with the Association of Fundraising Professionals globally, which has over 32,000 members. And the objective was to come up with a definition, a working definition of what diversity really is and what do we mean by it, and to bring in a lot of aspects, because there's so many different areas to slice and dice and break down, that wanted to get something that really covered everything, but was still open enough to include others as it came. So worked with a number of different people from all different backgrounds, whether it was social backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, geographic backgrounds, different countries, and tackled the issues and really had some, in some instances, some heated conversations because people had pretty defined perspectives of what it meant for them, depending on where they were situated. I mean, one example was there's a big contingent of folks that were African American, and I brought up the subject of, well, there's really only one place in the world that you would find African Americans, and that would be in America. People of African origin, that's a different story, but so there's all sorts of discussion. But the short of it was we came up with definitions that included inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and coined a phrase, well, not coined a phrase, coined a term or an acronym, IDEA, which has served the profession for the past 5 years, and it continues to grow and people continue to add to it. And but I think that was a really good experience in collaboration, because everybody that was involved in it was respectful of each other, was able to give their perspective, was able to be heard, and out of that and the great diversity that we represented, out of that we were able to come up with some sort of model to work from. And it's not perfect, but it's certainly a great starting point for delivering to the rest of the 32,000 members worldwide that are as diverse as from India, from Yugoslavia, from South America, from all over the world. But it's been used as a successful model to go forward and
That's great, Wayne.
be respectful.
Wayne, I heard you not only talk about your a great experience, you identified answered the second question, which we might as well do this. You identified a clear barrier, a clear problem of people having different perspectives and baked in perspectives, and then you had a solution. So if you want to tell that story, I'm happy to hear from others that you really touched on all three of the questions. So let's just have a conversation. Who's next? Judy, you've got to have some stories of your best experience. Judy is a master of appreciative inquiry, valuing all that is before you go anywhere, all the great assets. And she has had more of an impact on me through our ski trips out to Norquay and the 3 hours of conversation every day that we did it on my development as a man. And getting in touch with my intuitive contextual side that we guys all have. So thank you, Judy. But what was your best experience? I want to hear from you. What about that best experience was
I can't even
exceptional?
tell you my best experience. I think that I've never been part of like a huge collaborative project. I just use a collaborative approach to pretty much everything I do, primarily because I can't do it all. And, even if I could, I wouldn't want to. The more heads and the more people you have involved, the better the outcomes can be. And so it's just an approach that I've always taken in my business since I've become independent. And even at Xerox, I was at Xerox for 20 years. You just have to learn how to collaborate in the context of everyday survival and getting things done. You cannot be a sole contributor and not collaborate with other people. You just won't get anything done. So I can't really speak to my best experience because I've worked with Wayne for many years, and Wayne and I have collaborated with large healthcare institutions, and we get it done, right, Wayne?
Excellent.
Yeah, and it's breaking those cognitive barriers and getting people to collaborate. It's and we've been able to accomplish that. So it's been lots of aha experiences during the conversations, for sure.
Yeah, and lots of
Wayne, can you tell us a
get
little
out
more?
of the 8,
Can you drill down a tiny bit on the cognitive barriers?
Well, yeah, it's fascinating. I can use because right now we're doing so much more work. Just to give everybody a quick context that doesn't know who we are, we have created a human measurement system that measures people's thinking on things. Sorry, Morris.
He's flagging on time. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
That
sorry.
was the Moose 10-minute mark.
That was the 10 minutes.
Okay.
Or
Sorry.
Wally the Moose.
Something, yeah. Our algorithm measures the difference between how important something is to someone and how well they believe it's working, and which is what we call the expectation gap. So if it could be 60% of expectation, or if it's really not important but it's working really well, it could be 130% of expectation, right? Which means maybe we're putting too many resources, or maybe people don't understand why it's important. So those are kind of some of the key elements. But we've applied this and that measurement. And what I've been fascinated with is that we're doing more and more work in the diversity and inclusion area. And one of the things that is really opening up collaboration, and I've done a little bit of work with Jeff and Frank as well on some of the age diversity components of it. And when you get into D&I, people kind of think of your cultural background as the big area of diversity and inclusion. And in fact, there are 4 areas that we find really fit into that whole thing. And it's not necessarily about right and wrong. It's about different thinking, right? So there's your cultural background, which is the one that sort of takes the lead on what CNI means. But then there's age diversity, and there's gender diversity. And then the fourth area that we're really into now is what we call cognitive diversity, and how we think about things. And, we create cognitive bias by conditioning and the way we grow up and all the thinking that goes along with that. But we also have certain ways that we that we prefer in terms of the way we work, right? And we use the Bassiter model, which is incredible for that, but there are some other ones. But like, for example, I'm very much a conceptualizer, and which means conceptualize, think up ideas and think up more ideas and kind of get on with more ideas. And those kind of people, they drive implementers crazy, because implementers want to go out and make it happen. And they think that us conceptualizers are just too weird and they never really apply anything, which is true. But then at the other end, it's the implementers drive us nuts sometimes, because what do you mean? What do you got to go say? It's not ready yet. And I mean, we've all been there with that. That kind of cognitive thinking and diversity, and from that end of it, is such a critical part. And now we're starting to look at all four areas and then being able to segment out different groups. And it's really fascinating, the kind of information we're getting back, because the differences are not necessarily as systemic as people think they are. There are differences sometimes in just the way we approach and look at things. And it's not necessarily the humans that are a part of the element. So it's been pretty fascinating. And the work I'm doing with Judy, we've been able to discover a lot of those in the healthcare world, because so much is so focused on particular elements that this is the way it is because it's always been this way, rather than backing away and saying, you know what, if we all talked and worked together, we could actually come up with a new and different way of doing something. So it's really quite fascinating. And when we use the analytics to break those cognitive conditioning, it's amazing how people open up now to new ways of thinking. I'd give you one quick example, then I'll shut up, because before Morris tells me I'm running out of time. But there was an example. I was down in the States, in Arizona, and I was up at a little restaurant just north of where we were in Scottsdale, and this was back in 2006. And there was a young guy, and I was just on my own because they make the best chicken wings, and that's why I went up. But there's this young guy not far from me ranting about how uninformed the Democrats were. Now, believe it or not, in a place in a rural area in Arizona, somebody was ranting that way. But and he was a young guy, and he wasn't drunk or anything, and he was quite very articulate and everything. And I wasn't far from him, and he looked over at me at one point, and I said, can you give me an example? I'm from Canada, because you can get away with anything, right? I said, I'm from Canada. Can you give me an example? And he looked at me, and then he looked down, and he looked over, and it's probably 40 seconds later, he said, well, my family's always believed this, and my dad always taught me that.
Yeah.
Then he looked at me and he said, do you think they are? Because what had happened was his cognitive bias had been broken. And I wasn't judgmental. It was just, can you give me an example? And I didn't say much of anything else. I said, I'm sure there are some that are an art, right? And he said, yeah, you're probably right on that. And he actually talked himself out of that, because it wasn't a demand or an attack. It was just a question for clarity. And we're finding that sometimes once you get past that, you can actually enable much greater collaboration between people.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to put in a little commercial for Wayne. He did an online use of his tool with a bunch of people in an auditorium in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you know Republicans and Democrats, I've seen people put Obama on the pedestal as the greatest president ever, and a Republican call him a silver-tongued devil. Like it's so stark, the perspectives. Like 70 million people voted for Trump. Like that's people going to the ballot box and placing a vote for him. So Wayne was able to actually show that there was very little in terms of real interest that mattered to people among the differentiated Republicans from Democrats. Just remarkable. These people think they're the devil incarnate on the other side of the fence, yet in terms of the future of that city, they actually are about within 2% of difference on their views of what's important and how things are going. So if that doesn't align people, it's so cool.
We use that term alignment because if you get people aligned around a common outcome, then you can get them to collaborate. It doesn't necessarily mean they agree on how to get there. It means they're aligned on an outcome, and an outcome is a better city. Okay, so how do we get there? Now you've got a much better opportunity for conversation when everyone agrees that we want the same outcome, right? And unfortunately, people are just too stuck into this right and wrong thing, and that breaks down collaboration in a big way.
And Wayne and I have been connected on this work for about 6 years. Our mutual friend, John King with Tribal Leadership, had done the same work. From a facilitation standpoint, I think we're going to just continue till about another 5 or 6 more minutes. And then I'll give you 10 minutes on the content that I'm supposed to be delivering. But this is, I much prefer the wisdom in the room. But I think I'm going to hopefully tweak your all interests on the idea of what I call a new form of organization that I believe hasn't been done before. So that's a pretty big
Hey,
piece.
Greg.
Yes,
Wade.
Wade.
Sorry, I
Thanks,
feel
Wade.
like I'm lowering the wisdom in this room, but
No, time out, buddy. What do you have to say?
so so I guess everybody knows each other because I feel like kind of the odd person third wheel.
No, we just take in as much as you can and share what feels right. Well, have you worked in collaborative settings with others? Like our economy is a collaboration where we get this stuff called money. And I say, here's a piece of paper, Wade. Can you get me a Coke? Like, well, that's pretty crazy, but that's how we work and how we collaborate. Tell me a story of, or what you think your best experience might have been, or what was good about when you have worked with others, what stops us from working with others, and maybe how we can overcome those barriers, or just listen, whatever works for you.
I mean, there's many. I mean, like when I did ethics and communications in college, we got into like certain ethical cases, like say like the Challenger and groupthink. I mean, that's like everybody eye rolls at that because that's like the prototypical, like, oh yeah, we definitely don't do that these days. But and yeah, there's I think micro levels of collaboration, like lean process and agile thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's what's the word I want? Shoot. Larger levels of collaboration, like macro levels of collaboration. And so I'm on several, like say, patient engagement committees that all collaborate at some sort of level. I'd say kind of a mid-level between macro and micro.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is, I'm on another citizen engagement thing in health, and we're fleshing out the digital health map. And the talk was like, are we going to engage AHS or engage my local health system? Sorry, not everybody might be from my local context, but the local health system, or do you engage private third party and funding accelerators and all that sort of stuff? So, which ones you go, what's the approach? So, and then I was on Accelerator last year, and that was a good mid-level collaboration to bring I was a mentor on 2 groups, and I was a member on 1 group. Was that last? No, not last year. Sorry, 2019. Dang, it's been a while.
Just feels like last year. Feels like 10.
So I think there's these varying levels. I don't know if there's been like one really good collaboration. I think some on that accelerator was kind of good collaboration. The question is, is there more collaboration in a lean process agile? So I was just watching a video from Envision, which is a persona development app, and they just created a film. And so I was going through it because I had missed the time. So I was going back to the video, and it talked about, well, if you work with yourself or 2 or 3 people, you work fast. But if you work in a more connected group, you get far. So that's where I'll end.
Wade, I could play back to you about 10 great points you made. Right back to your first words out of your mouth was groupthink as a tremendous barrier. Maps completely on to what Wayne had talked about. People baked into their views. Either you're at odds so much and you can't work together, or you all think the same way, you work together, but you get completely blindsided because you're all looking the wrong way down the street and the bus hits you from the other side. So Lois, I'd love to hear from you before I go in and give my talk a little bit about the focus of the meeting.
Well, I just thought of a couple of small collaborations. One still exists in Calgary called Options 45. But what worked was people who hardly knew each other's last names met together and all shared the same objective. They wanted to make some new opportunities for people over 45 interested in finding work in a rather tough job market. So they had the idea, then they looked around for somebody with the space and had an idea and went and contacted them. And then it just happened. And what I liked about the collaboration was the speed with which it happens. If you just target people that share the same vision, then it's very fast. And there was another very similar one where we brought a trainer to Calgary and trained 70 people in the view of conscious aging. Just 3 of us had the idea, and then we looked around for collaborators, and within a few months we had that one happening. So I like the speed with which it happens.
Excellent. That's fantastic, Lois. We have fallen into, Jeff, please.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm just going to say, I'm hearing a theme here that is in terms of diversity and what Wayne Steer was saying about able to be heard. Trust is a major element in collaboration. And I see 2 other things. One is there a benefit to myself, and is there a benefit to the greater good? And it could be that the benefit to myself is contributing to the greater good. But I've always been a firm believer in the power of inclusion and collaboration. I believe it's essential to making significant or any type of significant change. But I also believe that it begins with the power of one person that has an idea or a vision to change, and to add to that another power of one and another power of one. And so you build that collaboration by the basis of building the trust, the buy-in, the benefit, and all of the above. I also learned early on in one of my collaborative initiatives that people seem to fall into one of 3 categories. The first are people who buy in immediately. They get it right away and they're all in. How can I help? Let's roll up our sleeves and do it. There's people who say, fold their arms over and say, prove it. Show me why I should be involved. And there are people who, for whatever reason, are never going to get it, or they don't want to get it. This isn't for me. I don't need it. And I think the recognition that that's okay, but we're not going to waste our time on trying to get them to buy in, because it's counterproductive to where we're going. Over time, either they will buy in or they'll be part of it or they won't. But that's how I've seen collaboration over the years.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. Okay, I'm going to do a bit of talking if that's okay. Feel free to interrupt me if there's something that I'm going to try this out. I believe with the uncanny valley and the 70% or 30% reduction in brain processing that happens when you try to make sense of a digital image of another human being, I'm going to talk to a PDF instead of putting you all to sleep with a PowerPoint. So I'm going to do a screen share. Again, play with your upper right controls to make sure you can see. If not, you can just listen. All sorts of funny things happen on a presentation view when you're presenting with a PDF. So hopefully everyone can see a simple one page. And this is, I'm the master of one pagers and two pagers. If I can't say it in two pages, I don't understand what I'm talking about. So this idea of a collaborative is rooted in work that I've been doing for a long time, going back to working under NAFTA, coming up with a vision with 60 stakeholders in a room from Canada, US, and Mexico on an environmentally sustainable freight system, which was big scope, 3 countries, all of the trucks, all of the rail, all of the air cargo, and all of the inland port activity. And we came up with this wonderful vision on, there's about a page vision, because we'd gone through an entire scenario planning exercise. We mined and lived the scenarios and learned what we did. Went to the boss that hired us and I said, okay, we got this great vision. All strategy starts with vision. How can we go forward now and put that vision into reality? That was 10 years ago. And I've been on this journey of how to make the world better through shared action ever since. And I think I finally have an answer that might work. Let's talk briefly about tough problems. Rapid change is the reality. We have these complex adaptive systems, big fancy words. Think about a city. We have food systems, water systems, energy systems, mobility systems, markets, and a whole raft of players, individuals, groups, organizations, multi-stakeholder groups, all participating in getting everything we need to us in this natural and built environment we call a city. That stuff all grew up in the last 200 years. We used to go to markets in towns. We were probably farmers and shoemakers. Now we're in these complex systems that no one controls. Governments try to govern them, but they have differing degrees of effectiveness. People are transacting business in them. People are trying to get their needs met. They're trying to make the money they need to pay their bills. So you got a whole bunch of complexity, and then you've got a raft of change. Changes in the overlays of social, political, economic, environmental, and other systems, and your head goes kaboom. And I don't believe you can try and map it, you can try and measure it. Anything short of Wayne's technology, where you actually ask participants, what do they think? And there's the data. You know, I think you're at a loss. So what my friend Adam Kahane, he's famous for working in South Africa post-apartheid. As soon as Mandela got out of jail, they had a multi-stakeholder transformative scenario planning exercise on the future of South Africa. And he's done work of that scale ever since all over the world. But he talks about this complexity that I'm talking about. He just calls it tough problems. Social complexity, a whole bunch of actors with a whole bunch of different opinions. Dynamic complexity, causes and effects aren't connected. How did I get my food? Well, I can't map that out between the trucks and the suppliers and the growers and the retailers and the wholesalers and, you know, the whoever oiled the wheels in the shopping cart so I could pull it off the shelf. So all sorts of dynamic complexity, really important with something like climate change. The emissions over the last 200 years aren't probably going to really hit home for another 20 years. So why do I need to do anything about that today? Well, if we wait 20 years, we might be swimming in Vancouver or into Kelowna if you're not careful. Generative complexity, there's this idea of tipping points where we could be moving into fundamentally uncertain futures. I think this pandemic could shift us. Many believe we're already in ecological overshoot. We could be in civilizational overshoot. So we might be going into completely uncharted waters. We could have another 10 years looking like the dirty 30s post the Wall Street collapse in 1929. I want to work against that. And so working with Morris here, we've talked about really inspiring people through a TED Talk I've developed. And we're working on post-pandemic futures and to tell those stories about a future where if we work together, it's going to be a much better future than if we don't. And then we have ways of equipping individuals and groups and organizations to exercise better agency as they participate in building a better world. So the solution we've come up with is something called a collaborative. And collaboration's been around since the dawn of time. What we're talking about is much like a corporation allowed a sole proprietor 200 years ago to bring in a body of people to get the business done. We're talking about now a body of stakeholders. Rather than one stakeholder trying to make change or a few, we're talking about allowing all the stakeholders in a system or sharing a shared purpose or wanting to tackle a tough problem into the collaborative that the focus for which they have a focus. It's 100% inclusive. I'd like to use the word 1000%, but that's not mathematically correct. It has its own strategic syntax. It's got a shared purpose, a why. Who's at the table is completely open. It can start at one or two. It can grow to everyone that cares about, let's use the term about healthy aging in North America. Those decisions can be made to onboard. Wayne's technology in particular can wrap around the opinions of 3 people or 3 billion people. He just needs more servers to make that happen. So it's Wayne's technology is a big part of this. It can all be deployed 100% online. We'd like to have a backbone organization or 2 to just support the whole. And that's just good collective impact, collaborative wisdom out of Stanford University. That's one of the ideas is anytime you collaborate, if it gets any more than us just sitting around chatting, you might want to have a way to convene, a way to move money, either through a corporation, a not-for-profit, those sorts of things. The biggest value and the entire pitch here is this: you don't have to sign up to a North American healthy aging collaborative strategy that's already been baked before you showed up. If you onboard, all you have to do is agree to a few core values about things like respect and being inclusive and maybe positive, maybe fact-based where you can be, maybe to do no harm, and provide your information. Here's a place on a web, on a database or a spreadsheet of who Jeff Rubin is, wisdom of age, what his thing is, what his email is, maybe his cell number. And suddenly we've knocked down all those silos. People have become aware. I had no idea you did that, Jeff. I've been doing that one state away. Jeff's out of Kentucky. You know, there's people in Alberta that now know Jeff, care about the same thing. They can, so the 4 dimensions are awareness, promotes access among people that share a common vision or a common purpose. We're doing a mental health and wellness collaborative. Actually, that provides access to people that need help. They can type in, I live in this city in Alberta, I'm suicidal, who do I contact? So those are the 2 big things that are literally 5 minutes of people's time at $0. Sign up to the values, tell your story. The 2 options after that are to communicate with anyone you want to in the big white tent and to collaborate should you choose to. There's some very simple ideas around the collaborative, ideas around organic collaboration. We have a piece called the Collaborative Leader. It's a 2-pager. If you're going to collaborate with others, look in the mirror a little bit. And then we've got an entire 6-module piece of infrastructure called Collaborative Leadership that helps people that choose to work together to work better together. That's on the shelf. You take it and go. We can bring a strategic thinking in by something called theory of change, and Wayne Steers helped me on that. United Way of Calgary, for example, uses theory of change with all of the organization it funds in Calgary to do things like youth at risk as an issue. How do we solve? How do we move youth out of risk? How do we address poverty in Calgary? How do we end homelessness? What's our theory for doing that? What do we all think we need to do? Who's doing what? So you can still be very strategic in your collaborative, but it's not the first thing you do. It's after you've got together, you've looked at who's at the table, how you choose to work together with your values and your ground rules. And then when you get into the what, you can start using tools like that. So that's kind of a thumbnail of the idea. And this is a mental health and wellness conference. So people did want to, I'll just give you a real quick 30-second overview
Hey,
of
Greg,
the, yep.
before you go there, can I just add that one thing that you and I've been working on that you haven't included there, but it's in the big launch phase again, is that measuring of humanity.
Let's leave that open, Wayne. I've got to hard close this so people can get back to the conference
Okay.
at 12:15. So let's talk about that at the end.
Okay.
And I'll try and
Just-
bang through
yeah.
this in another minute.
Okay.
So and this is Judy Dom 101. These are the design elements. So you want to start a collaborative, Jeff. Lois, on a healthy aging. Let's talk about those 3 ideas on the left. And that's just one pager and two pagers. That's 5 pages of ideas. Okay. So we're not going to have any more than just a comfortable conversation about new ways to think. Organic collaboration actually brings in Mother Nature, just as she grows your body in a healthy way. That's an idea on how to grow a collaborative in a healthy way. So let's say we want to look at getting started. We're not going into all sorts of infrastructure and stuff. We're going to talk about valuing what is in the group we have, confirm a shared purpose and shared possibilities. Judy Dom 101, appreciative inquiry. And then if we decide to move forward, the group can step forward and look at collaborative leadership as infrastructure, mind suite analytics, importance and performance, theory of change, embracing a shared improvement story. And that's just a check to say a whole bunch of collaborating about a whole bunch of stuff like, how to make a great beer in downtown Calgary in a back alley somewhere. That might be great collaboration. It might not make the world any better. So that is kind of a strategic check should you want to have one. Sometimes people don't want to be strategic. They just want to get together, have a chat, share ideas, maybe do something, maybe do nothing. So it can be whatever the group decides it wants to become, right up to including all the stakeholders in a massively complex adaptive system. So hopefully that's turning on some lights. This is kind of a piece that's actually being published in Community Now magazine in February. Just talk briefly about tough problems, a new solution, all the attributes. I had someone 3 weeks ago saying, Greg, a woman out in Vancouver, about 40 years old, 15 years with Accenture. She said, collaboration's been around forever. What's different about your piece? And I think I hopefully have made the case about what's different. And although it's hard to make that in 7 or 8 minutes, but it is an evolution in organizational design thinking as fundamentally different as going from sole proprietor to corporation 200 years ago. And that's what this tells a story of. A shoemaker having the opportunity to go from 10 pairs of shoes that he makes himself to manufacturing 1,000 pairs of shoes a month, and bringing the body of people, a corpus, a corporation around him to be successful in that scale up. We've had these systems grow up. We need a body of stakeholders to bring this to life and get to solve tough problems or tackle areas where we have common concerns. So I'll just spend 30 seconds on the Hope Across Alberta Collaborative. This is work that has been crafted over the last 10 years. Like I said, we had a tax lawyer in Alberta, kill himself, most of his family in May. I reached out to a woman called Catherine Brownlee on a Saturday morning. She had said because this person was a friend and she was working in the HR department of the law firm, she said she's committed her life to mental health and wellness. And I sent her a link, a note on Zoom saying, Catherine, what are we going to do about this, with an uppercase we? In 3 days, we had a Zoom call with 10 people on it. Another week later, we had 22 organizations sign up for what is now called Hope Across Alberta, which is the collaborative for better, this is our why, better mental health, wellness, which is kind of the non-medical side of mental health. People that take schizophrenics on nature walks, because it just does good things for them. They might not have the evidence. So bringing together the medical, mental health, the wellness people, and you guys all know the flavors of wellness. There are so many dimensions, and recovery, better mental health, wellness, and recovery across Alberta. I've come across blue zones. There's 50 blue zones in the United States. There's one that started in Airdrie about 6 months ago. It's an $8 million price tag on it. And I know a $2 million wellness initiative in Airdrie. And Airdrie is a town of about 25,000 people outside of Calgary. And the $8 million Blue Zone Airdrie doesn't know about the $2 million Thumbs Up Foundation. They're both all about wellness. So there's a lot of that left-hand, right-hand things going on. The former Minister of Mental Health and Addiction didn't know about those two. An MLA in Alberta that actually put his name to the funding request didn't know about the other one. Left hand, right hand, that's just the way it is. It's all the good news story that we have these things grow up that aren't connected, aren't aware of each other. It's normal, it's natural, it should be celebrated because they're all good things. We're just helping to connect the dots. So I think that's it. Our big white tent on wellness, Hope Across Alberta. It's a big white tent. It's only half built. We've done the initial design. We've looked at probably 24 collaboratives plus wellness initiatives around North America. We're partnering with Be Well Orange County, California, which has 100 organizations focused on wellness in Orange County, with a not-for-profit that's directing funding from public, private, and personal individual sources to fund collaborative initiatives in their coalition. But they're still looking to us because they think we have more robust ideas on how to collaborate than they've had for 3 years. They're evaluating where they're at and will be working with us as soon as the forest fire of pandemic that they're living in California subsides a little. They're going to be kicking in with us to see what we can do together. So the story with Hope Across Alberta is the tent is only half built and we got to build the other side. The other side is things like backbone organizations, funding, governance, relatively simple things if you've got a good collaborative model. The last thing I will say is how this thing can also be brought to life. Things like Wayne's technology, MindSuite analytics, good collaborative leadership infrastructure, that's all good. It could really be brought to life with a digital platform. Right now, the digital platform for Hope Across Alberta is a spreadsheet. Name, organization, story, website, email. The digital platform is just a big spreadsheet that's accessible online. So, and if you look at Be Well Orange County, they are an absolutely remarkable organization. I would ask everyone to have a look at them. Just Google it. And what they have threaded together is incredible in terms of, but they're still a coalition. They're not 100% inclusive. Collaboration's not working as well as they could be, but they've had 3 years of doing it. So with that, we are done. And I'm not going to go running back to the conference. We can continue the conversation. Wayne, would you like to share?
Yeah, well, the only thing just really quickly to add to that, Greg, because you've been a part of this conversation and now it's come back in a big way, was, and the real quick story on this is about, we created an empathy model where we measure human empathy because that was one of the big things that's been stripped away from humans. And Arizona State University identified a number of years ago that they were turning out students who were less socially responsible than the ones they were getting. So they were taking nice kids, turning them into jerks to get a financial result. And a lot of that stripping away the empathy was, and people were rewarded in big ways for that. So, and they were concerned about that. So they had heard about our empathy model and we started to do some of the testing using some of our model. And while I was there, I met the Dean of Humanities. And he's got a project called Project Humanities, which make the world a better place. And he's pushing it out through individuals, crowded, hard to get any traction. And I go to see him. And if you guys know ASU, it's this big, beautiful university that's got technology hasn't even been developed yet, right? I mean, it's just stunning. And he's in the basement of a building. And I literally had to duck to get into his office where he is and everything, right? And I'm sitting and listening to the story. And I said, this is such an incredible project. Why are you in the basement? And he looks at me and says, well, because it's only the disciplines that you can measure that get funding. And I thought, wow, because we've been measuring human analytics forever. So I literally went away from there. I worked with John, Greg actually, and Judy were both probably parts of those early conversations that went on with that. And we isolated 14 constructs of humanity, simplified the language, and put them into our systems and started measuring it. And sure enough, when an organization had a high humanity score, they were actually making more money as well. So we created an initiative called Humanizing Performance, which is essentially create a business case for humanity. So to let these sociopathic people that run a lot of organizations know that actually, if you adopt this type of behavior within and support it within your organization, whether you agree with it or not, doesn't matter. Well, it does, but it doesn't, if you know what I mean. You will actually make more money as well. And then there's a financial model tied to it. So we've attached this humanity component to it, and it's fascinating. And I know, Greg, now it sounds like the perfect time to build some of that thinking into the initiative in Alberta as well, because everybody was kind of off things, and then now everybody's rethought it, and all of a sudden everybody's back on the bandwagon again because everybody kind of shut down over the last 8 months. Mm-hmm. We were going to launch it last spring, but what happened? So now, but everybody's looking at it saying, you know what, we need to really help each other. We need to support each other. We need to be in better components there. And we've been measuring it. And what's interesting is we did a pandemic checkup, and we measured 4 key areas with a number of questions. One was organizational performance, where we had people indicate where they were today and where they were pre-pandemic, and culture, organizational culture, wellness and well-being, which we've been measuring forever. And then the 4th area was humanity. Performance and culture had dropped a little bit, 5 or 6 points. Well-being and wellness had dropped 14 points, and we're going to have very significant fallouts in that area, Greg, and I'm glad to see there's focus on that. But the good news was the humanity scores actually went up about 9 points. During all of this, people had started to be nicer to other people and a little more empathetic. And how can we leverage that and have it so it doesn't go away again once things go back to normal, as people are talking about it? And it's such an interesting story. And that's why this fits perfectly, Greg, with the Alberta possibilities thinking, right? Mm-hmm. as we go through. So anyway, I'm glad to see kind of the progress everybody's made. I love meeting everybody here, and I'll shut up now.
I'd love to hear from Jacqueline and Morris and Frank what they've taken away from their hour of investment.
Well, I have a much clearer idea of what we're trying to do with the collaborative that you've been fostering around healthy aging. And I understand the concept a lot better. So I actually am a person come lately because Jeff and I were talking just for a few minutes beforehand, and he sent me the connection to get in, but it didn't include your 3 PDFs. And if you could send those to me, that would be great. Thank you. I'd especially like to look at them a little bit more again, and before we have our next get together.
That's wonderful. I will send an update to the meeting request, and everyone can get the PDFs right off that.
Okay, that's great. I also want to say, I was wondering when you were down at ASU.
When?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
When were you down at ASU?
When was I last there?
Yeah, when you were doing when did you initially go down?
Oh, that was about 3 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay. Because I graduated, that's where I graduated, got my graduate degree and my ancillary graduate certificate in gerontology down there. I went back down there as an older adult. Oh, okay. And yeah, that university is spread all over the valley, actually.
Oh, and very progressive thinking.
Yeah. Well, yes, and the new president, yeah, made a huge difference. He came in, but he was an extremely business-oriented person, so it was interesting how things evolved from there. But that's interesting because what you were saying is when I went to university down there, I had a lot of people here in Calgary go, why the heck would you go to ASU and why down there? Because that's just like going to a Canadian or going to the University of Calgary in terms of what I would learn about people and things and diversity and all that. And they simply don't understand some of the stuff you were talking about, the politics and things. I mean, seriously, it is a different world, a totally different world. And I certainly learned that going to university down there. And the fact that your typical or individual person growing up in the United States is a very different person than the typical person growing up in Canada in terms of access to education and all that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, no, it is. There are some fundamental differences for sure. And a lot of that is based on cognitive bias and the way people are trained and as they're growing up. And
Absolutely.
I've had these conversations with Jeff and Frank too, because they see that. And as you get older and you kind of break some of those cognitive biases, it's amazing how people open up to new ways of thinking about things, right? And it's, I know you're out of time. I've got a 30-second story I'll share.
Actually, I've checked the schedule. I guess we can run the workshops for as long as people want to stay, so that I thought we were going back into a plenary again. And it turns out that we're on cruise. So
okay,
let's talk.
All right. So I've done a lot of work with ASU, and the humanities side thinks a little bit differently, and that's one of the neat things about it. And President Crow actually saw some of those differences. And I spoke at a conference down there with John, and it was actually in Texas, but it was partly with the ASU group and some of the humanities stuff we were talking about. And we actually talked about community and organizational culture. And when I spoke, there was about 8,000 people, so it was a big conference. And at the end of it, there was a breakout table, and I was at and we had the like a panel discussion, and then they opened it up to questions from the crowd, and they gave the microphone to somebody, and then he says, "Hey Wayne, you're from Canada, aren't you?" Yeah. Word gave it away, and I'm standing there. Sorry?
A?
Yeah. One of them. Well, there's some words that we pronounce differently. That's kind of funny.
Oh yeah.
A boot.
Yeah. So
And roof.
So I'm standing there on the stage in front of like 8,000 people, and there's this person, and you can see them on the big screen, that thing, but you can't hardly see them with the microphone, and they're talking to you, and it's kind of weird. And he says, so he says, "You're from Canada, aren't you?" Yeah. He says, "Tell me, why do you guys get along so much better than we do?" And I'm standing there in front of 8,000 people, and I didn't have a planned response. And one of my mentors taught me the whole idea of going with flow and trusting yourself at a certain point in life. So I just opened my mouth and started to talk and let whatever happened come out. And what I said was, I said, "You know what I find?" I said, "I find here in the United States, it's I'm right and you're wrong. And if I'm right and you're wrong, and you're right and I'm wrong, we don't have anything to talk about." I said, "But in Canada, we say we're different. And if we're different, we still have room for more discussion."
Right.
And then I just shut up and I hope for the best. And there was like 30 seconds of silence. And then all of a sudden everybody started to clap, because I guess I had gotten into one of those cognitive biases, because a big part of the training and learning and systems approach in the United States, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, is about right or wrong, win or lose, right? Not necessarily through collaboration. But now so much is opening up to this new way of thinking about how do we break through some of those biases? How do we work together? And I loved, my conversations with Jeff and Frank, about this, because we were so aligned on that. We got it, right? It wasn't about being right and wrong. It was about being able to have conversations around things that we were aligned around, and then have discussions around where there may be differences, right? And it's such a significant opportunity, and collaboratoriums and the work that Greg is doing and wanting to bring, and what I've learned from Judy over the years, who I consider one of my mentors as well, is just incredible stuff, right? As we go through, and once you get into that kind of a conversation, it's so amazing, right? Because you can have good spirited conversations, but it's not about being right and wrong. It's about being different and building on that, so you can add the different pieces to have a much bigger outcome. So it's but anyway.
One of the things that I did learn from, and it actually it was Americans who said it, but this one professor was getting some discussion going on issues and things. And one of the things this person said was, this professor said was, is that, well, one of the things that they grow up being told from the time they're young is that the United States is the best in the world. And I think that means that everybody else is lesser. And she said, that's one of the reasons that you're talking about, I'm right, you're wrong sort of thing, that it's possibly engendered in some of their thinking.
Well, some of it's it's the win-lose environment, and I wrote a book that did quite well back a number of years ago, and I'm rewriting it now because it was differentiate to win. But I'm working with some of our U.S. partners, and we're calling it differentiate to win, win, win. So how can we approach things with a winning approach, where it's not about me winning and you losing, or me winning and them losing? It's how do we win? And it's pretty interesting now with some of the ways of thinking that are coming, that people are looking at that, because that's really what collaboration's about. It's how do we all win? So
I'm going to jump in. I threw the documents in the chat, and I've enabled the chat and figured out how to do that, which is different again when you're doing a registered Zoom call. So try and just, I think if you click on it and download, you should be able to pick them right up. I've included, please give me any feedback on anything. Most of you know how to get a hold of me. Wade has also posted some information links in the chat on some things that he's been associated with. There's just so much, an abundance of, I think Wayne sent me 6 years ago, Simon Sinek 2-pager on weirdos that had a bell curve. And so there's these really brilliant people that think really differently. And then there's these other people at the other end. They're about less than 5% of humanity. The guys at the left-hand side are all in jail or insane asylums. and these other people that just think differently, give them a hug. And so it's been a wonderful long journey on all of this stuff too. Simon called them weirdos. I call them unconventionals. And it's us that will chart this new world. And working with Morris tomorrow on his CPR, context, purpose, results, how to get your story, get clear in your own mind what your warrior cry is about, like creating collaboratives, what purpose, what you achieve, what actions you'll take so that this outcome will occur, and being very clear on the results you're seeking from your work, from a meeting, or anything else. And so I really want to thank Morris for that tool that he's been using for 15 years. And it's helped me tell this story. The story of today actually is rooted in some of that clarity, that simplicity that lies on the other side of complexity. So haven't heard from Mr. Frank. He's got an amazing story. And Luke, you haven't said a word either. So please come in and share some thinking with us.
Well, I can go after Frank.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks for the big umbrella. There's so much to cover. I'll just try to focus on a couple things that are top of mind. I wish Wayne Steer was still here because I want to compliment him on his idea acronym.
Yes.
Anyway, two thoughts that came to my limbic brain as you were speaking about collaboration in the beginning. I'll just make 2 short stories. One was in 1977, the Johnstown flood happened in Pennsylvania. Dam broke, and I was on the Office of Emergency Preparedness for the Commonwealth of PA, and underneath me had the county weatherization crew. At any rate, to make a long story short, just because of the urgency and bloody difficult situation, of course, I made a few phone calls. Being young and stupid and not knowing there's polite protocols, I just called people up and said, hey, can you help? So I called the media and the police. I was crazy. I called everyone. And within 3 days, someone walked in the door from the Four Freedoms Foundation in Valley Forge, gave me a check and said, here, use this for whatever you need. Someone else delivered a truckload of food. I didn't even know what to do with this stuff. I was young, you know, just, well, thanks. I got money and food, and they're 100 miles away or whatever. And at any rate, to summarize on that, making these impulsive phone calls to people I knew, the Red Cross and other agencies that needed communications, and Motorola at the time had invented this cool new invention. It was called a cellular phone. I'm sure you guys remember the big block phone, and they donated equipment as well. So I'm not saying this for hero points, but I was amazed at the end of that adventure how everyone just jumped in, double jumped in, and quickly dealt with the urgencies that were there. And I'll spare you the list of chores. Second, I want to ask a quality question at the end of this rather than preach. I saw in 1985, I lived between Boulder and Denver. I saw along the freeway that 2 trains had collided head on just under the turnpike onto Denver. And they glowed orange for days. It was such a horrific fire, and it destroyed that highway for a while. And then this is always stuck in my mind, because I understand construction. I don't understand the entire process of what made this miracle happen, but somehow that repair happened in lickety-split time. I forget how long, a month maybe 6 weeks. And of course, if there was going to be a normal bureaucratic process of teamwork and collaboration and politics and all that, it would take forever, you know, to get permits and all the testing. It always struck me as, why in the world did this sudden, very, how should I say, primal need for connection between Boulder and Denver and the developing community? How is it that everyone pitched in and there was no fighting over money or contracting? How the hell did that happen? That's all I want to, put to this group. And thank you for being here. And I'd like someone to tell me, how do we pull it together when we really need to? Why does this happen? That's all. Thank you.
That's my wheelhouse, Frank, is not being the expert, but helping experts work better together. And people like Wayne and Judy and Luke and others have contributed. In fact, the people I invited on that meeting request, I met with a lady from London yesterday, a friend of John King's Empty Your Cup on Sunday. And she heard me say, I'm stuck in this pandemic, and Frank's a rocketeer as a child, making model rockets. Frank, and I had the same conversation with Frank a week ago or 10 days ago. Frank, I'm freaking stuck with all this payload. I got no delivery system. I'm stuck on the launching pad. The shuttle bay is full of great stuff to make the world better. I repeated the statement, checking with John King's group. John beat up on me. He got a 2x4 out. And he said, Greg, getting tired of your weather reports. Your family, come in and tell us how you really think and feel. And I just said, I really feel stuck on the launching pad. And Kathy Ford, a new friend now and a supporter, and she's going to connect me with folks in the UK and the UN and the WHO to help collaboration on immunization. And she's just full of ideas. And we just met for the first time yesterday. But she said, and maybe we can all take away this coaching, just like John King coached Wayne Clancy and I 2 Christmases ago on what it is to be a master in your trade. A master can connect with other masters from other trades. What Kathy said, if you go and send signal into the universe or to God or whatever you want to call it, the field, if you talk about being stuck on the launching pad, guess what you're going to get back? You're going to stay stuck on the launching pad. She said, Greg, you define what does delivering look like? This was 24 hours ago in our first one-on-one conversation. That's the wisdom she provided. And so I started sending signal on what delivery looks like. and what great delivery looks like. And it feels like team. And I look at this email request, I basically just started pulling people that might be interested. And there's probably 30 to 50 people on there. Those are all teammates in making the world better. And I'm glad you guys are all able to show up on short notice. But that's Luke, we got to hear from, his name is Morris Lukowicz. He's a brilliant retired hockey player, but he's learned more about himself and how to make things simple and better and use language that's positive and not defeating. And we've known each other for a few years, but it's only in the last few weeks that we've really reconnected. And he's got a little rule of thumb. His name is Morris Lukowicz, former Winnipeg Jets hockey player, played with Gordie Howe and Bobby Hall at one time. He's got a rule, if you become friends, you can call him Luke. So Luke, you've listened so well. Please share everything that's on your mind.
This has been a fascinating last hour for me. Like it started off with Judy. Like I love that piece. Who would want to do it all? So that was cool. And that it was interesting. I mean, your experience with collaborators must be amazing. So, and then with Wayne, the expectation gap. That is the first time I've heard that. Maybe I've been, out of society for too long or something, but I'm interested in learning more about what that's, the expectation gap. Wow. And then with Jeff, the power of one, that was interesting. And then to add another power of one to it. I'd love to have a conversation with you because I have this thing about the power of one. And then with Wade, it's been like I see a genius here. And also, Wade, you have the best picture behind you that I think I've ever seen. Okay, I mean, that is a thing of beauty. And with Frank, wow, just experience. Like to sit down and have a beer with you would be, that would be amazing. So, Jacqueline, it's amazing the things that are coming out of Arizona State University. There's one, if anybody wants to Google something, it's called Surface-Wise 2. It's a new viricide that will actually kill COVID for 90 days straight. And it actually came out, it was tested out of that university. So I have two quick stories. One was we had a collaboration with the Winnipeg Jets one time with our power play. Our head coach was Tom Watt, and he said to the two assistant coaches and 5 of us was go down and figure out our power play. And so, okay, and then come back and let's see what we have. So we went down there, and the one assistant coach went to open his mouth, and then our Norris Trophy winning defenseman, Randy Carlisle, who had traded for, and he came from Pittsburgh, said, when we do this on our power play, we're going to be successful. And he basically gave us a 1, 2, 3 or an ABC and how we were going to do this power play. And he showed us, and it ended up that the coaches ended up saying nothing. And so it was an interesting collaboration because it was dictatorship. Randy was a natural general, and he told us what we were going to do. And for us to be, all we had to do was execute it. So this went fantastic. We had the best power play in the NHL for the first little bit. And then, of course, what happens, the other teams watch video and they start to figure out what was our ABCs and what were the 1, 2, 3 we were doing. And so then they immediately started to defense it. And so we had another meeting. And it was at that meeting, it was very, very tough. Yet our general had to say, okay, I'm open to another way, because he was very much a one way, and that way is my way. And so Randy actually opened up, and we added some pieces to the power play. And so where it went uphill, then it kind of went downhill, and then it went uphill again. And yet it was, I watched him struggle with the whole piece that a collaboration was going to be better than his one rate way. And then, a piece that is very dear to me is that 8 years ago, my daughter Zoe, was a young Canadian, and she still is one at this time. And the young Canadians, they sing and dance during the Calgary Stampede Grandstand show. They're amazing. They just celebrated 50 years. And 8 years ago, we had the floods. And Alberta, I believe it was one of its proudest moments of collaboration, that a context was set, come hell or high water. The Stampede was going to go. And it is amazing what this province did in that short few weeks that we had. The floods, I believe, hit at the start of June, and Stampede was the start of July. They dug up that entire racetrack and put in a whole new racetrack. They cleaned up that grounds. The Saddle Dome went from where the mud was up to like half of the bowl to where they cleaned that place up. And actually it ended up not being able to get used, and yet the effort was amazing. But that collaboration, I believe, just showed the strength of Albertans to be able to get together. And I believe, who was it that said, I believe Frank, that said, why is it? That is a very good question, a quality question. I've got a saying, the quality of our lives are based on the quality of the questions we ask. Why is it that a disaster has to happen before we get together and work together? Like, what's the next? What's the next one? The pandemic. And even a strong Alberta has not been able to. A strong Stampede was not able to go last year because of the pandemic. My daughters missed a whole year of performing on that stage. So it seems like the challenges are becoming even more incredibly tough. So the idea of collaboration, this is what I love of what Greg is doing, and to be able to get this out into the world so that the world really starts to work together, and to somehow shift away from that one right way mentality to that there's many right ways. Or like Stephen Covey says, win-win or
no deal.
Or no deal. Yeah. So, the whole piece is pretty fascinating. So I'd like to say thanks for everybody's inputs today.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks for the invite.
And thanks for your gifts directed my way in the last couple of weeks in particular. I'm happy to continue if people have to leave. Wade, if you could drop me an email. I think you're a spark plug. You put about 17 posts in the chat. I have no idea how to get them, but let's start with a conversation if you want to give me a call. And the idea of a collaborative, this mental health and wellness collaborative, it's a big white tent that you can just come into for free. Sign up to be respectful and positive and not tear people down, not be a jerk. And when you come in, you make people aware, hey, I'm Wade, this is what I care about. Individuals, coffee groups, people that go on hikes to stay well, public, private, not-for-profit sector organizations. All of these existing multi-stakeholder groups can come in. And if you imagine being in that big white tent, wow, I didn't know you even existed. Let's talk. Let's communicate. Hey, do you want to work on something together? Because we got 4 people working on exactly the same problem in 3 different cities. Why don't we figure out the one best way to do the problem or solve the problem? And let's move that solution across every city in the space. This can be applied to cities. It can be applied to provinces and states, countries. I would actually like to see a collaborative. One of my dreams is to actually take those 14 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which are great goals because they're all one word, 1 or 2 words, with about a 6 to 10 word description, with I think 250,000 people were consulted on setting them, and actually mobilize the world. See, the UN just sets goals, but they say we leave it to the countries to figure out how to do it because we don't dictate. We have no power. These are 14 goals. If you solve those goals, your country will be good. I want to see shared action around those goals, which are about, equality for women, education, clean drinking water, healthy ecosystems, so who knows? Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
Jacqueline,
You and I've got to
Jacqueline's
go
waving.
also here. Greg, thanks for the invite. And remember, everybody, go Flames, go.
yeah. Yeah. Are you a hockey fan, Jeff, at all? Our Kentuckian friend? Oh, you're on mute there, buddy. You're still on mute, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I said I haven't been a hockey fan in the past, but I will be now. But I want to know if I can now call Morris Luke.
Absolutely, Jeff. The power of one.
Thank you. Thank you.
See ya.
Who would be your favorite hockey team, Jeff? You're in Kentucky. Like we're all over the South, but we're not there yet.
No, it's not. It's not. I grew up outside New York City, so it was the Rangers or it was the Islanders. So,
Depending on the year.
yeah.
And Wade, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and please reach out to me, and I want to harness your energy. Old guys like me need young guys like you in my life, because you're full of ideas and have all the energy in the world. And it sounds like you've been close to 100 things that I know nothing about. So drop me a note. We'll get on a Zoom call and we'll get busy on building a better world.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. It was a really great conversation today, as I would expect if Greg has pulled everyone together. See ya.
Well, let's make some great things happen, Wayne.
Yeah.
Jude, thanks for all your support.
Thanks. Well done.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. Although I've been up since 5:30 this morning writing scenarios, post-pandemic scenarios. So
Have you? Oh my.
I've got more to do there, but it's been a good day. Any feedback, Jude? Did you get my email there, Wade?
I didn't see it in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What did you think, Wade?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect. Your subject looked interesting, and I came in and it seemed like everybody knew each other, and
No.
you welcomed me okay there, so I felt
Good.
included. That's good.
Well, you had a lot to contribute. Don't downplay.
Absolutely.
Don't. No one else other than me put anything in the chat.
True. I'm a bit. Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty amazing. I'm going to stop the recording.
Connected. No, when I came out, I'm like, how